He's not done yet, but it's been buried pretty low.
And welcome to the Down in Front Podcast, the official podcast of downinfrontpodcast.com. My name is Warren. I will be your host this evening, and thank you so much for hanging out with tonight. We are giving you a full review of HellFest, newest movie from Gregory Plotkin. Before we get into all that business, if this is your first episode, thanks for joining. What we do here is we review movies, TV shows, a bunch of different other media, all over a beverage, as we talk about what we do with our lives. So, without further ado, we're going to go a bit of a round table. So I want to hear from the beautiful mouth of the South, Mr. Brylan. How's it going, man? What you been sipping on and what you drinking? And also, what you watching?
Oh, yeah. Just a lot of stuff to go on. Yeah, I am doing well right now. Right now, I am still sipping on this Hochstadler Slow and Low Rock and Rye whiskey. It still tastes very good and very smooth. I definitely recommend it. And what I've been watching recently is Chef's Table Season 5. That they continue to make this fantastic continuing documentary on people's inspiration and art on why they are chefs and the dishes that they make. And every episode is just well put together where you actually get this journey of this person's story and get to see the results of them just continuing to be the people they want to be. So I really appreciate it for that. Specifically, this season's really cool to tune into because it's all about underdogs or people that you usually wouldn't expect to be like the top chefs in their place, but they will highlight people like just a lady that makes barbacoa in Philadelphia, and it's not like she works at a 5-star restaurant, but they consider it the best barbacoa on the planet because of the way she makes it. So it's really cool, really awesome. It's on Netflix. I always recommend anybody to watch this.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I'd love to check that out. Well, as always, it's great to see you. It feels like you've had that bottle for about maybe a whole year. How long have you been sipping on that same bottle of whiskey?
No, I got this bottle like 2 weeks ago, and I had a little accident, so I did drink a little bit the last podcast we did, but then half of it went into a rum cake. Or whiskey cake, I guess. And so I just have very little bit left for me to sip on.
Wait, you had an accident that you accidentally put it in a whiskey cake?
Yeah, I was making like a bourbon drizzle for a bundt cake that I made, and just a little extra got in there. And so it soaked it pretty well. Still tasty, still a good apple cider bundt cake with a lot of whiskey aftertaste.
That sounds good. Hopefully that you save me some.
I didn't.
Okay. That's okay. That's okay. I still like you. And our best friend, one of the silkiest, smoothest people that we've ever seen before, a little under the weather, but still amazing, Mr. Mocha Mike. What you been sipping on and what you been watching, my friend?
Hello, Down in Front podcast audience. How are y'all doing today? I apologize for my silky smooth voice. I would love to say that I lost my voice by screaming in terror while watching this week's movie. However, that was not the case. It's just a change of seasons over here in New York, up in the Northeast. And, I got sick. As it happens, cold's going around, and I lost my voice. But I'm pushing through it, and I'm here for you all today, so you're going to have to suffer with me. As for what I'm drinking, I had with me today a delicious Maniac Pilsner. For those of you watching the video, I'll post that up there because it looks really good. Actually, this beer can is dope. I might just post it to the Twitter account. But it's a Pilsner from Kings County Brewers Collective, also known as KCBC. It's this joint right around the corner from where I live in Brooklyn. They make great beer, and I figured the Maniac title would be perfect to go in line with our movie tonight. Finally, as for what I've been watching, I recently binged my way through The Dragon Prince on Netflix. This show was pretty dope. It's an animated series that really feels like they're trying to capture the magic and the adventure of the original Avatar: The Last Airbender series. It's definitely, at least not in this first season, as good, but the characters are really enjoyable, the adventure is fun, the animation is really fluid, and they do a good job of building out a world that is interesting, even though it kind of relies on a lot of the tropes that we've seen in other fantasy stories like Lord of the Rings. So it was only 9 episodes for this first season. It's clear that Netflix wants us to do well so that they can make more, so I'm going to look forward to the next series that comes out.
Yeah, I tuned into the first episode, and I was getting the feeling that the story was kind of like the skeleton script you get for writing a Final Fantasy story. So you have like your multicolored like elementals and all this stuff set up, war-torn nation. Everything like is perfectly set up for a good adventure. I thought the characters had some really unique personalities in that first episode, but the animation was just really throwing me off in that first episode. There's moments where it feels like the animation's at like 5 frames a second. You don't know if they did it on purpose or if it's just bad.
So this is actually something that remained consistent throughout my viewing of it. Like you mentioned, that sometimes it feels like it's almost going at a low frame rate. In fact, in our group chat for the Down in Front podcast, someone posted the trailer for it when it first came out. And I remember asking, is my internet bad or is the frame rate for this video really low? And that definitely follows through. It's their artistic choice. It threw me off for a bit, but you get used to it real fast. I do, though, wish that it was a bit more fluid.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, this is great. I mean, I definitely have to check this out, especially if it's on Netflix. I feel like this is the year of the Netflix. They've been pumping out a lot of good stuff recently within the last couple of years, but it definitely feels like they're coming to their own. So I'm even glad they're pulling out even more and more animated stuff. That's exciting. So that's always cool. And I am Warren. I will be your host this evening, as in most nights. And I am currently sipping on a Jameson and Diet Coke because I need to watch my figure. And I've also been watching a bunch of stuff, but season 3 of Insecure just wrapped up. It's on HBO. I know I've talked about it a lot, but if you guys haven't seen it, and audience, if you haven't seen it yet, definitely go check it out. I mean, it definitely gives you a crazy detailed and like very accurate, I believe, depiction of just, people like black people living inside of LA and, just dealing with like normal day sort of life and activities and shit like that. So definitely go check it out. I really enjoyed season 3. I wasn't a huge fan of the actual ending. I felt like they needed to do like a 60-minute episode, but it was just a standard, 30 minutes. But I did like it. I'm definitely going to probably rewatch it again. I hope they get signed on for a bunch more seasons because I know that these characters that we've now grown to and love, like hopefully will get better and better. So I'm super pumped about that. And so yeah, that's what I've been watching. So again, tonight we are going to be reviewing a newest thriller movie called HellFest by director Gregory Plotkin. So the one thing we wanted to ask is a pre-spoiler question. So we try to make sure that we don't spoil any of the movie for anybody. Even if we don't like the movie, we don't agree with it, or even us on the Down in Front podcast may not agree. Still, all movies are sacred, and you shouldn't spoil them. But we wanted to get into a bit of a pre-spoiler question here. So what was your favorite haunted house movie experience, either movie or sort of experience? So I'll toss it over to Mr. Brylan first. What you got for me?
So a lot of haunted house movies out there I think are pretty cheesy, but the one that really sticks out to me is one from the 1980s called simply House. And it's not about the medical doctor. It's just about a house that is haunted and actually has spirits that are kind of controlling everything that happens in it. And ultimately deals with alternate dimensions. And it gets really crazy and has some really cool, unique monsters set up for it. But my favorite haunted house experience I've ever had was when I took a trip to Berlin a few years ago. My brother and I, we were going to go to this museum to check out a former Nazi air raid bunker where people were kept when like bombs were being dropped in Berlin and things like that. And in order to get into the museum, you actually had to go through a 2-level haunted house inside the bunker itself. So they're using like these old like little crevices and catacombs and stuff to kind of like have people dressed up in monster outfits to jump out and spook you. And it was fun, it's exciting, but I also thought it was like one of the neatest ways to get into a museum I've ever done too.
That sounds badass.
Yeah.
Nice. Mocha, what about you?
Well, as far as favorite haunted house movie, that's a really interesting question. I think I'm going to have to throw it back to 1999 for House on Haunted Hill. By no means is this an endorsement of the film being good, but it is my favorite, like a classic haunted house movie. If I have to think back really quick and imagine one, it's very 90s. It's got Taye Diggs in it, Jeffrey Rush, a bunch of other people, and basically there's Owen Wilson. And basically the premise is, a bunch of people are offered like $1 million to be able to spend one night in a haunted house. And as the night progresses, the demons and spirits that are trapped in the house start to take their vengeance out on these innocent folk, and all hell breaks loose. And it's just, kind of a movie that I watched as a kid that I enjoyed. And actually, now that I talk about it, I kind of want to go back and watch it again. Maybe it'll be on Netflix.
Yeah, it could be. That'd be pretty cool to check it out. Especially, welcome to the month of October. That's all you should be watching is hilariously amazing / terrible horror movies, right?
The most 90s thing about this movie is the fact that Chris Kattan is in it.
That's very 90s. All right. I would say, I know that it wasn't quite a haunted house movie, but I think a lot of these haunted house type of cliches have been pretty bad. But it's either a mix between Saw and Saw 2. I think that was interesting. Yeah, I did like that. I actually enjoyed the movie. I liked that it felt like it was based off of a story and not just a random slasher. And it definitely added a bit more of some intelligence into the movie of why, like, was this guy actually evil, was everybody else evil, and really kind of made you think. And so I like some of the things that he was kind of putting up in these two movies. I'm only referring to Saw 1 and 2. All the other ones don't count, so let's not even bring those up. But I did like Saw 1 and 2. I think that's probably my favorite sort of experience so far. That's back in 2004, which is kind of a bummer because it's only, 14 years old. But I don't think there's been any other movies that I enjoyed as enough. So that was probably would be what I'll go with for my selection. Cool. Well, guys, we're pumped. We're excited. I'm pumped to actually talk about this. It feels like me and Mocha's going to get into some heated discussions, and I may need a new wedding date soon. But before we end up ruining the movie for you, we would say this is where we're going to take a break. So if you haven't seen HellFest just yet, I wouldn't suggest watching it. But if you definitely want to check it out, feel free. This is a movie that I would say that you may want to end up either, if you do want to go out, make sure you have a few friends, you have a bunch of friends, you have a couple drinks, like you want to have some fun and kind of sort of like make fun of a movie while you're watching it. I think you're going to get a lot of good out of it. If you're just trying to find a movie to kill some time, maybe not so much. I think there's some other stuff that's going to be coming out this weekend too that you may just want to wait on. So if you haven't seen HellFest just yet and you want to be spoiled, stay tuned. We'll be right back for a quick break with a full spoiler review of HellFest. And we are back, and we're the Down in Front podcast. My name is Warren. I'm with Brylan. I'm with Mocha, and we are in our spoiler section. So if you haven't seen the movie tonight, we are going to be reviewing and spoiling HellFest. So the way that we're going to be talking about this movie, it's a horror movie that's going to be here. So we'll break it up into a couple different sections. We want to talk about the acting a little bit and the story, and then I did actually wanted to ask you guys how about we grade some of these murders in here, because I think that's always always something that I always look forward to as a slasher film. You know, people are going to die, but how much effort do they put into it? So I definitely wanted to see if we can kind of grade some murders in here, and then we'll wrap it up with the final conclusion. And definitely stay tuned because we will be having a last call. So definitely kind of check that out. But I'm going to toss it over to the mouth of the South. Brylan, tell me what you got.
So I'll start off by saying probably the thing that disappointed me the most about this film is that there's a lot of cool ideas here, but everything comes out executed very blandly and very plainly and expected instead of shocking you. That's probably the saddest thing about this movie. You gotta cast that it's a lot of people that are not stars or anything like that. They do a solid job of playing the typical slasher victim role, I believe. But one of the biggest things I love about this movie is just the design and the setting of HellFest itself. I think it's really cool that I haven't seen in a horror movie before that we have a killer on the loose inside of like the more realistic haunted house that we expect. And this is a fairground of haunted houses where you can actually get more different experiences out of each one. Whereas a typical haunted house movie is set up where it's like the dark, strange castle on the cliff with the old matron taking care of the house that may be haunted or not. And that's always the premise of the haunted house movie. It's cool that they said, let's put the slasher in a haunted house movie like we would actually go to haunted houses in real life. So I thought that was actually a really good plus for this movie. Unfortunately, everything else, when it comes to creating scares inside of a haunted house village, essentially, it's pretty obvious what everything is going for. And even like the slasher himself, he doesn't feel like chilling or anything. He's kind of reminds me of like this Scream type of villain, which I kind of like because he's mortal. He's not like an unstoppable machine like Michael Myers or Jason. He can get kicked in the nuts and feel it if it happens. But for the most part, I felt that anytime he did kill someone, it was kind of tepid and that nothing was really surprising in this movie. It was kind of like very paint by numbers. It was nice to see Tony Todd, though. He's always amazing. I loved his little MC role. I think we should have seen him visually more and not just his voice introducing all the haunted houses. But he has a great voice. But I would have liked to have seen that MC pop up in other like levels of HellFest as well.
Yeah, I think, the introduction, like the insertion of Tony Todd being in this movie, the director at least knew what sort of movie that this was making, right? Like, I felt when I saw him, I was like, oh, okay. So you kind of get that people who are going to recognize this guy who's in this movie, they're going to know that, oh, this is a horror movie. Like the only reason why Tony Todd's in here is that he's making this movie kind of for us, sort of thing. And so I did like that. I did like the fact that it added a bit of campiness to it. I just didn't feel like anything else sort of matched in the movie besides that, and it was kind of a bummer that they do a couple things like put Tony Todd in, like clearly do like the classic jump scares and things like that in the movie for the campiness that you can forgive, but then other times they try to make it be serious, and I just wasn't sure why they were trying to do that. Like, what movie that you're going to be. Just choose that one movie. Don't try to put in actual conflict and actual stakes when you've already sort of abandoned that idea in the first place, Yeah,
and it's like they didn't want to stick to their own rules that they were trying to set up. Like Gavin's death, for instance. Like, you see him walk into that workers area and he tries to pick up the hammer and he's like, it's too heavy. And then all of a sudden when the killer grabs it with one hand like it's nothing, and then just goes about smashing his head in. And I was like, okay, I must have missed something here. Maybe Gavin was just playing a joke to himself or something. I have no idea what would happen, or he's just weak.
And what's particularly annoying about that, and I'm going to get into this myself too, is that the implication there is, oh, this villain has some sort of otherworldly strength. We still haven't seen what he looks like. Maybe he's otherworldly. but he's just a dude.
Yeah.
So there was no point in that. Unless you're just really trying to rub it in, like Gavin's face, like the actor's like, yo, this guy's a soy boy, he can't do shit. Like,
well, even in the beginning, right? I was also thinking that maybe it was he did have super strength because he picked up that woman. And he was like lynching, basically stringing everybody up, and maybe he can easily kind of do that. And I see that, and that's probably why people were dying really easily when he was stabbing them. And I get that. But then again, no, you know, like that comes into later. I'm like, your steel-toe boots, bro, is the only thing that makes you superhuman. I got nothing. I know.
Yeah, it goes very back and forth where it's like he kills Gavin with authority, but down the road he's like struggling with stabbing people or even just trying to hide himself from authorities when they actually find out he's actually running around.
Yeah, it's just very odd. There's a lot of things I just didn't get about this movie. Yeah,
and ultimately, like, if y'all don't mind if I jump to like the reveal of the killer, we find out at the end that the killer is just like a guy with a daughter at home and just like everyday suburban dad or husband that has in his basement a closet full of different masks, and he comes home to his little girl and she says, "Daddy," and that's all we see of the killer because he escaped and everything. But it's never really earned. It doesn't really illuminate anything about the killer. When I saw those different masks, I was trying to think, like, okay, is he supposed to be some guy from another franchise, or is he from Twisted Metal because there's a big clown mask there? I don't know.
I think what they were getting at there was just the fact that in the beginning of the movie they talk about how, there's been other such like haunted houses where people have been killed, and I think the idea was like this dude just has masks for every haunted house that comes into town.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it would have been way more impactful if we, like, if this would have just been somebody that we've seen, like, show his, I understand, I don't know why you're not showing his face, like, make it seem that this person's a normal person that's trying to help out that you would never, like, that's the creepiness about it. I think it's creepy when we know that this is just a normal person in everyday life, that's a barista, or, like, the bartender, or just somebody who's normal, who just likes to do this, who like lives out of a van or something like that. Like, I think it would have been way more interesting to make it somebody that we've seen, somebody that we've at least seen a couple times, that we clearly know who he is. Like, for one reason, I was like, oh, maybe it's a security guard, right? For example. Or maybe it was like a group of people, or maybe it was a family. Anything would have been better than the reveal that they gave us. And that's what I thought was kind of a bummer. Even for the fact that the reveal was so bland that, he sees, basically he does this to get his daughter gifts from like the carnival games. And so the same sort of stuffed animal that Brooke and Ash had, he gave that to his daughter. But it's also curious is, okay, then why are you killing these people and not just random people in the park that cross? It would be much easier to kill random people in the park, but for some reason you're targeting people for no reason. I think it's kind of
he was targeting women, like people who were rude to him, right? The one girl bumps into him and then for some reason has this reaction which no one in their right mind in a haunted house theme park would have, which is, she says, like, what are you trying to do? Scare me? Fuck off. And it's like, well, you're literally in a place called HellFest. You paid to get in here. Yeah. Like, why are you offended? But she pushes past him, and so he targets her. And then later on, afterwards, the girl is, like, kind of rude to him, too, right? Because she's watching him hold her. And then she's like, well, what are you waiting for? Just do it already. And then at that point, like, she had seen him, and so that gave him cause to follow through with her, because she was the only person that knew at that point that there was an actual quote-unquote killer.
Yeah, but, like, he's killing people that's rude to him because he was rude or creepy in the first place. That's going to elicit that particular reaction to somebody. Like, if you're walking and you're going to bump into somebody, somebody's going to say something. Especially when what was his name? Gravy Boy? Yeah. Especially for
Gavin.
Gavin, sorry. For Gavin being in like that sort of area, he's awkwardly sitting there standing kind of watching him the entire time. Gavin didn't do anything to him. He then pushes Gavin, trips Gavin out the way, and then ends up killing him. But I'm like, well, why? Like, I don't see you being that creepy and going after these people. It was also weird. The other thing that I thought was kind of silly was the fact that, you know, you clearly have Natalie's character dead to rights in the house at the end, but you choose to hit her in the face and kind of break her nose, and not kill her.
It's kinda weird.
But you're going to go and run after, you know, Brooke's character for some strange reason without killing Natalie. And so I'm like, what are you doing? Kill them all. You can easily kill all of these people, and this movie can be 5 minutes. But I don't know why you're like drawing it out.
So there was a potential there for him to have had some weird fascination with the girl, Ashley, right? So, or whatever her name was, Natalie. Mm-hmm. So when he first sees her and he stalks her or whatever, when he finds her in the bathroom, he kind of just goes up to her while she's doing the most awkward hair drying scene. Like, first of all, I don't know who in the right mind uses one of those weak ass, like, elementary school hair blowers that sounds like this and stands below it and just closes their eyes for 7 minutes straight while, like, gently scratching their scalp. Like, no one would dry their hair like that.
You see it at the commuter train station all the time.
Well, even before that, Mocha, look how high that damn machine was. Did y'all realize that she, like...
It was like 7 feet high.
It was like...
She had to slam dunk in order to hit the on switch. But, like, so she's under there drying her hair, and he's just standing next to her, like, kind of watching her, right? So there's, maybe he's obsessed with her. Then she goes into the bathroom, and he follows her, and just kind of, instead of using his brute strength like he did with everybody else, and, like, busting down the door, he just shakes the door creepily, and then, like, touches her head when she switches over to the other stall, which, by the way, if somebody is trying to break into your bathroom stall, and your escape plan is just to go under into the next stall over, and you're like, phew, I made it, and you relax, you're an asshole, you deserve to die. But at that point, there was this sense that, maybe he's obsessed with her. But there was no payoff to that, right? When he does finally catch up to her, he bashes her in the face, right? Which is kind of weird, but he just does that. But then, like, I would have thought that at the very least, when you see that when you get to his house and you see his daughter, maybe his daughter is a little brunette white girl. Mm-hmm. Maybe his daughter's name is Natalie, and so he had some sort of weird connection there. But there's nothing there either. The daughter is just is just blonde, and we don't get her name, and there's nothing really to tie it in. So the choice to bash like what's her face in the face instead of kill her when he had the opportunity doesn't make sense with everything else that's going on, and it completely deflates all the bit of good will that they had built up in the movie for me as a viewer.
Yeah, and like this movie, I mean, it seems to set up some really cool things and then automatically deflate them with the next scene afterwards. Like when Quinn and Taylor, like when he kills them, it's out in the open in front of 100 different eyewitnesses in front of security and everything. He's like, all right, I'm just going to be Mr. Stabbington and just take him out. I'm like, okay, that was unexpected. That's actually pretty cool that you're not giving no fucks about anybody around you anymore. What's going to happen next? And then you see Brooke and Natalie. It's like, there's the exit, a big exit sign. They walk in and like, oh, it's another haunted house. Who saw that coming? Everybody did.
Well, and even to the point where, how the hell did the police know where they were?
They had a map.
No one knows.
I mean, no one knows. And also, you're telling me that you're able to text with no issues in a bathroom stall, but the moment you make a call, you don't have any signal?
Yeah.
Come on. These are the things that I'm like, come on, man. This is just... It's kind of lazy. It's just so lazy of it. I can, at least, like, you clearly know that this person, at one point you knew that this person has Gravy Boy's phone. And so in that particular case, why not keep calling that phone so you know where he is as a tracker or something? Use some sort of common sense, some intellect to make you stand out instead of just being super scared and running one direction thinking that everything is going to be okay. It just mind-boggling.
Yeah, you touched really quickly on the police earlier, and I just want to point out that there's one thing that really annoys me in movies when any sort of officer or soldier who is trained in the usage of a gun is involved, where they don't follow the most basic premise of gun safety, where you don't point it at anybody else. Because when those two fake police officers came into the haunted house looking for the body at the end, both of them are doing this weird thing where they're just like hunched over with their arms completely locked out, and they're holding their gun and swinging it like in an arc, and they keep on like pointing at each other, like the back of each other's heads, as they're looking back and forth. And I'm like, these guys deserve to get shot. They both do. They need to shoot each other.
Yeah,
It'd be like
or
like Predator all over again.
Or one other thing that like kind of just would be bothering me is that there's all these hired actors to be these monsters and everything in this HellFest, and then when an actual murder goes down, if they're an eyewitness to it, they're not just like, "What the fuck, bro? Why did you do that?" They're not breaking that character. They're still staying in character, where one will actually hold the other person in place while the slasher like just goes ahead and stabs the victim, and he's just like, "Happy Halloween, boo," and just like leaves the scene.
What else do we have here for the acting in the story before we get into grade your murders?
I mean, the acting itself. So this is actually applies to a lot of this movie for me. The acting itself wasn't bad, but it wasn't really anything more than just passable. Like, it was uninspired. It was just like they didn't do a terrible job of just acting like teens hanging out for the most part. They were a little bit hyperactive, but not too it was whatever. There wasn't really anything interesting there. The villain has you had nothing to talk about with acting for him, because there was no acting. He was just like a stalker walking around. There's really not much to look at when it comes to the acting, aside from just the teens hanging out, which was passable at best. But I also feel that way about a lot of this movie. It's, the movie was boring, and that was, for me, was the most offensive thing. You want to talk about story, Warren. When you have a stalker slasher film, right? The horror of it, the scariness of it, comes from the fact that this person is following you around, and he can be a threat at any given time. And if you take a movie like Halloween, for instance, the godfather of all stalker horror movies, Michael Myers stalks Jamie Lee Curtis and the rest of the characters in it through their normal suburban neighborhood. So you're taking something that's really inherently unsettling and putting it into a place where you're supposed to be safe, and that creates this discordance that is scary. With this movie, they set it in a haunted, like a series of haunted houses, which is fine, right? It's a bit on the nose, but it's fine, right? It's a cool idea. Oh, the villain is hiding among the other actors, so you don't know where he is. But my big problem with this movie is that they establish that it's in a haunted house, and then they continue to spend a lot of time just showing people hanging out in the haunted house, walking through the haunted house, getting jump scares from things that are in the haunted house, and that shit should have been cut early on. Once you establish that they're in the haunted house, as an audience member, I know that nothing in the haunted house has any sort of actual threat, because the threat is the villain who we see coming, because he always starts a scene standing still in a doorway somewhere. So every single scene where they were going through more and more and more of the haunted house, going through another room and jumping at this, or going through another room and jumping at that, was a waste of time. There's no way to build tension there. You know that everything around them is fake. It's the point of it. And you know that the villain is always going to appear standing still and then walk towards you. So much of this movie, it was an hour and a half, and honestly, like 40 minutes of it could have been cut, because it was pointless. It didn't build any tension. It didn't add to the vibe. Nothing. It was just us watching kids hang out. And that's not why I went to see this movie.
Yeah, and I was even fine with the kids not really having that close of a connection to one another. You get a little bit with Natalie and Brooke, and they talk about in the middle of the movie, like, after Halloween's over, let's rekindle our friendship and go to Spain. I was like, sure, fine, that's good. Filler text.
Yeah,
but
what?
the whole like when you're introduced to like Taylor and Natalie and Brooke, Natalie's visiting for the first time to Brooke in a while, and surprise Taylor, who was someone she didn't like in grade school, is her roommate now, and Taylor has a pet name for Natalie, which I forget.
It's school.
Was it grade school? Was it grade school?
Yeah.
And I mean, it never sounds insulting or anything. It's just like, here, let me give you a generic term that you can call this person, and we'll just try to play it up as berating because we don't want to be offensive or anything. It was just very overly, like, antiseptic for a slasher film.
Yeah, and you know what? Those relationships, they should have been established. The point of establishing those relationships is to have an emotional payoff when someone has to witness someone else die, right? But that never happens. No one witnesses anybody die until the girl who keeps calling the main character grade school gets, like, stabbed. But that doesn't really matter at that point. Mm-hmm. But what really annoyed me was that so much of this time in this movie was spent focusing on the relationship, especially in particular Natalie and Gravy Boy. And with Gravy Boy, the situation with him is that it's like, cool, if you want to build up their relationship, have this slow burn where we're seeing that they're awkwardly into each other, they don't know how to make it happen, and then they finally make a move on each other in the photo booth, and things are good, and then things start going downhill from there. Cool, fine. Have his death be in front of her eyes to be either the first catalyst to make people realize that, oh, this shit is real, or have him survive to the end and have there be some drama built there with him having to die at the very last minute or something like that. But when you spend all that time building up their relationship and then just have him die off screen, it means the rest of the stuff that came before it is pointless and didn't matter. Mm. It never becomes an issue later on until it's just the the payoff of the killer having his cell phone in the bathroom. But again, that doesn't do anything with the relationship. And it's just a waste of time. So much of this movie wasted our time as viewers.
Yeah, and it should be a good signal to Natalie that maybe Gravy Boy's not worth the investment after he spends over an hour supposedly trying to win a stuffed animal for her after Asher told her that. And it was like, it goes from sweet to being creepy, and maybe you could have used that to try to connect him to the killings going on in the HellFest, which is really neat.
Or give us a little bit of a mystery. Give us a reason to think that Gravy Boy is the killer. Oh, he says he's going to go and get something for her, but he doesn't come back. But after that, the killer starts becoming more apparent where they are. Like, make that be a mystery for us. Give us something for this to be, but it was nothing. It was just pointless.
Even to the fact that you, like, I thought they were going to do more with, like, the dead bodies. I was hoping that the dead bodies would come back at some point, or they're in a haunted house. Maybe he can put the dead bodies in a haunted house, and that's our reveal of these people are actually dead or something. Like, we've seen them die, but like, okay, cool, but where the hell are you hiding these bodies? Are these bodies just randomly sprawled around? Or, because even after the end that you said that there's 4 confirmed kills, cool. I'm pretty sure somebody's going to see that there's a dead body just randomly lying on the ground. So, and it's not in the haunted house. That dead body was in the locker room with his head smashed open. Like, clearly there's an issue there. What the fuck? Nobody's saying anything.
Yeah, I was hoping, like, when the group, like, rolled up to that next section of HellFest and they had to pull out, like, the maps from the person's stomach, that was going to be like Gravy Boy in some way, that the killer had put him there, and they're actually pulling the maps out of his real stomach instead of an actor. And, like, when you get the boo surprise from the actor, you're like, oh, you know what? That would be a cool bit in a real haunted house festival that you go to. But for this movie, give us something unique that moment is worth it, instead of it just feeling like people walking around a haunted house.
Even something that you could potentially see coming, like, let's say, as each person gets picked off and killed, the actual characters are blissfully unaware of it. They're just like, oh, I can't find my friends. And then later on at the end, as the killer is chasing the final 2 victims into that final haunted house, and they get to that dead-end room, have all of the bodies be strung up there. Have the bodies, like, be the ones that, of her friends, be the ones that are popping out of the doors when they cross the line. Like, give us a payoff for that. Make it matter. But there was no payoff. None of it mattered. And we're all the worst for having seen it.
I also just realized that the killer, the slasher in this film, isn't even on the IMDb page.
Yeah, he's not casted.
He probably didn't want to be cut to this film.
He was like, "Yeah, I'll do your dirty work, but yeah, just keep it on the down low."
Oh man, I wonder who it was. I wonder if it was Matt Damon. That'd be great.
It's Andrew Lincoln.
All right, guys. So we've talked about story. We've talked about it. Let's get into our last section before our conclusion. Let's grade some of these murders. What do you got? What sort of? We only see like maybe 4 murders in this entire movie. So let's talk a little bit and let's grade some. How about you, Mocha?
Well, most of the murders were pretty basic, in my opinion. I mean, like 2 of the murders were just stabs. They just got stabbed a lot. But for me, the one that was most impactful was the needle in the eye. That actually ruined my night. It was really uncomfortable for me to watch. And I'll give them that. Like, the death scenes, looked pretty cool. I'll give them that. And that needle in the eye was really, really gross. And it gave me flashbacks to the film Fire in the Sky, which I don't know if any of you guys have seen. But that's a movie that traumatized me when I was a kid. And there's a scene in that movie where a dude gets a needle slowly put into his eyeball. And I have never forgotten that. And this movie brought all of that back. So that is definitely my highest ranked kill for this film.
Yeah, and even though the tussle between the killer and I think it's Ash that gets stabbed in the eye, even though that's kind of silly and corny and everything, I think it looks pretty funny because it looks like the slasher's like saying, "Hold still while I get as close as possible to your eye with this needle." That it's not like a slow-mo needle into the eye that at the very last moment, as close as possible, he just freaking jams it home into his eye, which I think was the shocking part of that.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I was just even hoping for even more in that scene. Like, that's why I was like, maybe he does have super strength. I was going back and forth because that dude clearly got overpowered within the span. Like, he didn't even try to do anything. He didn't kick him. He didn't try to bite him. He didn't even try to move his face. He literally just slowly let that needle. He slowly let the needle.
And that guy was the most jacked. And that guy was the most jacked of the whole group.
Yeah. Just shows you jacking doesn't always pay off.
I mean, it does for me.
Bradley, what about you?
For me, I think the most fun kill of this movie was the guillotine or attempted kill. I just like it gets kind of culminated with everything I thought was kind of cool about this movie, where you have this killer that's having to be in the same environment as the victims, where it's a haunted house with a lot of props around it and everything. Nothing's a real weapon, but you got to find a way to use it as a weapon, which I thought was really cool about the guillotine, that it's old and rickety and it is a prop. It's not like a real guillotine that he's trying to kill her with. That it has a dull blade. That's also something that is going to be something you find at a haunted house. You'll have a dull blade guillotine where they could cut fake heads off and stuff. So I actually respected that attention to detail and everything. And I even like that, he pretty much goes through with the execution, and then because the blade is dull, it just cuts the back of her neck, and Taylor's able to like kind of break the guillotine and get out of it because it is just a toy prop and everything, and starts running away. And then they decide to ruin that kill by just doing the all-out stab-a-thon of everybody in the middle of the park. So
yeah, another situation where they had something going and then they did one thing that made everything come before it useless. That is like scary, right? So one of the themes that you find in horror that really strikes chords with people very easily is claustrophobia. And so the idea of her being all happy-go-lucky and excited, and then he forces her into a different position and ties her down really tight, like that's inherently scary, right? That makes your chest get tight in the theater. And the fact that she got away is an amazing release of tension that you should be able to use to generate further tension as you go forward. But instead, she runs outside, and in the very next moment, he catches up and stabs her, and that's just it. She's dead. And so it was just such a waste. It was such a waste of such good stuff. And like even the guillotine scene itself was a little silly because she was strapped down in her arms, by her neck, and on her back, and I think maybe even her legs. and we see her like get her hand loose and untie the strap on her neck, and then she manages to break free of everything else and get away without him ever noticing. And he's literally right next to her, just trying to like flick a switch or like, you know.
Well, he's trying to unjam the guillotine and try to chop her head off again with it.
Oh yeah, definitely. But he is a total of 4 inches away from her, and he doesn't hear her break all the other straps, get up and run out the room screaming. Like, come on, man, work with us here.
Yeah, but I mean, I was hoping they would like dive more into this, where they had the killer have to use like all these haunted house props in order to actually kill his victims. I think it'd be a cool challenge to have for your killer, but they kind of bypass it. Like he finds the doctor's office and is able to get a syringe. He was in that workers area and found a syringe in the first aid kit. He had a mighty hammer when he actually cornered Gravy Boy. He was able to just sleight of hand steal an ice pick because there happened to be a snow cone vendor right there that was a little too busy to recognize that his ice pick got stolen. So there were too many like convenient, like lethal weapons, I think, showed up. But that guillotine, and to a point, like even using the whacking mallet, the like feat of strength mallet,
the Mueller mallet.
Yeah, that's a really cool like prop death to actually include in this, and I wish they actually doubled down on that a bit more.
I even thought that the fact that when the killer is coming into the actual sort of theme park or the haunted house, I thought he was bringing his own weapons, and that's why he was choosing to wear those steel-toed boots, knowing that, you know, when he walks through a metal detector that he's going to go off. So that was also a terrible sort of like wand, because he only like wanded him down one side of his actual pants, but whatever, right? Maybe he brought his own like mallet or his own hatchet. Somehow he brought his own weapons into this. Not, I'm just going to find a way to kind of kill these people by luck, right? Like just by getting some of these. And he also discarded some of the weapons, because why not just carry that mallet around? Clearly it was super effective against that dude's head, so why not just use that for the rest of the actual movie? It was just a lot. But I would agree with you, Bradley. I did think out of the kills that we actually had, like I really did enjoy that beheading sequence. I'll rate that as a 7 out of 10, just because I felt like the execution could have been better. But I do like how they were setting it up, because they give us a bit of a you see what I did there? They were giving us a bit of they play a joke on it before we see it happen, and then it really happens. I'm like, okay, that would have been cool if it really happened. How often do we see like somebody's head being chopped off via guillotine? That's great.
Right. It's like 1 out of every 4 horror movies.
Yeah, pretty much.
True. Very true. Very true.
But yeah, and I think I like that moment a little bit better. I gave it an 8 out of 10, just because like that whole set piece it starts with Tony Todd giving this great like just monologue about creatures of the night and hell and death and everything fun about Halloween, and ending with the fake guillotine beheading of Taylor, and then that actual beheading of Taylor, which I thought or attempted beheading, which I thought was just very clever on that type of murder piece, that you haven't seen it set up like that before.
And with that, we are the Down in Front podcast. Let's get into talking about our conclusions before we wrap it up. So, final thoughts of the movie, Brylan?
Yeah, this movie was just very boring and bland for a slasher film, but there were some clever ideas in there that maybe under a better director or better creative team, it could have been like a fantastic movie.
Mocha, what you got?
If you're going to try to come at us with a Stalker horror movie in the year that the original Stalker horror movie is getting its triumphant vinyl entry, you're going to have to come with a little more than what the team behind HellFest did. Like we said earlier, it was the most offensive thing about this movie was that it was boring. It had the potential to be at least really decent, and it wasn't. It was just super bland and uninspiring, and I'm just disappointed in Neil Blomkamp, or whatever the director's name is.
No, it's not Neil Blomkamp. You take that back. He actually makes good... that's Blomkamp anyway. It'd be fine. Gregory Plotkin. I definitely will echo everything you guys said. I think I actually looked at this I was really upset. I was actually pretty angry for this movie because of how bad that it was. And I can understand if you do a cookie cutter of a film. I get that. I get people not being like, I get campiness. I get the fact that you have to retread some stuff. But I don't think you need to retread why those previous movies also failed. And they just literally kept doing that same thing too. And that's what really kind of frustrated me. Just from the opening sequence of how people were acting, and just nobody had any common sense that they wanted to use, or, you know, if anybody would have just went back and said, hey, let's go in pairs together instead of being split up individually. Any sort of sense of common sense would have thwarted this dude at any point of the way, yet everybody chose not to do that. And that was what frustrated me. I really don't like this movie. I never want to use hate, so I won't use it here, but I would not recommend this movie by any means. And with that, we are the Down in Front Podcast. Thanks everybody for joining. We're super pumped to have you on here. Brylan, where can people find more of your work?
You can find me, unfortunately, getting a cut on my leg from a killer that's chasing me in a haunted house. That the scares only get activated by some sensors on the floor, and when I get this cut, it accidentally makes it where I cannot lift my leg over these sensors, so the killer can find my location on Twitter at Bryland, BRILUND.
You can't be mad. You can't be mad anymore, Brylan. Right? You can't be mad. Here's my necklace pendant that came from nowhere.
You can also find me on Instagram, where I'll post many movie reviews and TV reviews at I Am Brylan. I'll put one up for Chef's Table very soon. And I'm also the host of the Down in Front Gamescast, twitch.tv/Down in Front Podcast. We are playing through Spider-Man on the PS4 right now. We beat up the Shocker, and we're going to see what happens next.
And Mocha, where can people find more of your delicious work?
Yeah, well, you all can find me posting videos of myself sensually drying my hair beneath a 7-foot-tall hand dryer at Twitter. I'm looking like L.I., as the Lord intended. Unfortunately, you cannot find me at Mocha Mike. The person who owns that handle was murdered in a theme park, and his body hasn't been found since. So until they find his body and his Twitter password, you'll find me at Twitter, at Mocha Mike LI. You can also find me on Instagram, at Mocha Mike, where I post a lot of photography work. I'm going to be posting some images from my more recent trip to France there soon, so check that out. And also on Medium, at Mocha Mike, where I write some long-form reviews about the things that we talk about here.
And you can find out more of our work, so check out our website, downinfrontpodcast.com. That's going to be having our video teasers, literally anything and all the information that you need. You definitely kind of start there. If you find us on any sort of social media, you can find us on your favorite sort of podcast listening. So whether it's iTunes, whether it's Stitcher, whether it's Google Play, we're going to just be everywhere. So just search for us, downinfrontpodcast.com. On Twitter, we're _DIFP. And on Facebook, or facebook.com/downinfrontpodcast. If you like what we do and you want to support us and get some bonus episodes, get some early episodes, and also get some more information that we've been doing, definitely choose to become a patron. Patreon.com, so Down in Front Podcast. Even for this lowly price of pumpkin spice latte, that will be great for us. A little, what's that called? Pumpkin spice latte? PSL. I'm not a good speller. Definitely become a patron. Patreon.com/Down in Front Podcast. Thanks so much for everybody. I'm super pumped. Our next review will be Venom. Okay. I didn't know for sure, but
we'll be reviewing Venom.
I really hope that this movie is much better than collectively our last 4 reviews, not counting Next Gen. So we're pumped. Thanks so much for everybody. We will see you next week. And goodbye. So long. Farewell. Get scared.
Bye, everybody. Get spooky.